Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you for a moment because a lot of people misunderstand men. They think men are complicated. No, men are simple, but they are observant. And while you're out here trying to figure out what he's saying, what he's texting, what he's posting, let me tell you something important. He's been watching you the whole time, quietly, carefully, not to play games, but to answer one question in his mind. Can I trust her with my heart, my peace, and my future? Ladies and gentlemen, let me slow this thing down and really talk to you because this right here is where most people miss it. Consistency. See, everybody wants love, everybody wants commitment, everybody wants someone to choose them, but very few people understand that men don't fall for moments, they fall for patterns. A man is not studying what you do once, he's studying what you do repeatedly. And if you don't understand that, you'll keep wondering why things start strong and then fade out. At the beginning, everybody is on their best behavior. You're smiling, you're agreeing, you're flexible, you're understanding, you're showing up on time, answering texts, laughing at jokes that aren't even funny. That part is easy. That part don't impress a man. What impresses a man is who you are when comfort replaces excitement, when the newness wears off, when the effort is no longer automatic. That's when the real test starts. Men watch to see if your character stays the same when circumstances change. When plans get canceled, do you become bitter? When he's tired or distracted, do you take it personal and start an argument? When things slow down, do you lose interest or start questioning everything? A man is asking himself, if life gets hard, is she going to add peace or pressure? Because let me tell you something. Men are already fighting battles you don't see. Stress, responsibility, expectations. The last thing a man wants is to come home to emotional chaos. Consistency tells a man that you're emotionally stable, that your reactions match the situation, that you don't swing from extreme happiness to extreme frustration over small things. See, men don't need perfection. They need predictability. They need to know what version of you they're going to get, not because they want control, but because peace matters to a man more than people realize. And here's where a lot of people mess up. They think being consistent means being available at all times, forgiving everything and overgiving. No, that's not consistency. That's self-abandonment. Real consistency is showing up as yourself without pretending, without performing, without shrinking. It's having standards on Monday and still having them on Friday. It's saying what you mean and meaning what you say. It's not changing your personality just to keep someone interested. A man notices when your values stay solid, when you don't contradict yourself just to avoid conflict, when you don't agree today and resent him tomorrow. Consistency builds trust, and trust is what moves a man from liking you to choosing you. A man can be attracted to excitement, but he commits to reliability. Let me say this clearly. If your behavior changes every time you feel insecure, confused, or afraid of losing him, he notices. When you pull away to get attention, when you act distant instead of communicating, when you test him back instead of staying grounded, that inconsistency creates doubt. And once a man feels emotional uncertainty, he starts protecting himself by pulling back. Men are not good at chaos. They don't thrive in emotional unpredictability. That's why a woman who stays steady, calm, and authentic stands out. When you don't overreact to small things, when you don't need constant reassurance, when you don't make everything a test or a drama, that's attractive, that's rare. Consistency also shows a man that you know who you are, that your happiness doesn't depend on his mood, that your confidence isn't tied to how often he texts. When you can be warm without being clingy, caring without being controlling, present without being needy, a man feels safe. And safety is what opens his heart. Now, don't get this twisted. Consistency does not mean tolerating disrespect. If something violates your values, consistency means standing on that boundary every time, not just when you're angry, not just when you feel strong, every time. Because nothing confuses a man more than a woman who complains about something but keeps accepting it. That inconsistency teaches him that your words don't carry weight. A man respects a woman whose standards don't fluctuate based on fear. When you don't threaten to leave and then stay. When you don't say this is unacceptable and then excuse it. Consistency tells him you're serious about yourself. And when a woman is serious about herself, a man takes her seriously too. Here's another truth people don't talk about. Consistency builds emotional intimacy. When a man knows he can rely on your reactions, your energy, your presence, he opens up. He talks more, he shares more, because he knows he won't be judged, attacked, or misunderstood every time he's vulnerable. Inconsistent behavior shuts men down emotionally. Consistent behavior invites them in. And listen closely to this part. You don't become consistent by trying to please a man. You become consistent by being aligned with yourself. When you're secure internally, your actions naturally line up. You don't have to think about how to act, you just are. And that authenticity is what a man feels, even if he can't explain it. So if you're wondering why he's watching, why he's taking his time, why he hasn't fully committed yet, understand this. He's not measuring how impressive you are. He's measuring how stable you are, how real you are, how reliable your energy is, because attraction gets his attention, but consistency earns his trust. And trust, ladies and gentlemen, is the foundation of everything a man is willing to build. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take you deeper into something most people misunderstand, and that is emotional pressure. Because if consistency shows a man who you are over time, emotional pressure shows him who you are when things are uncomfortable. And trust me when I tell you this, men don't decide based on the good days. They decide based on how you act on the confusing days, the quiet days, the days when nothing is being said out loud. A man will create space sometimes, not always because he's losing interest, not always because something is wrong, but because that's how men process. Men think in silence. They sort things out internally. And while he's quiet, he's watching, not to punish you, not to control you, but to see how you handle uncertainty. Because life is full of uncertainty, and he wants to know if you can stand in it without unraveling. When that silence shows up, some people panic. They start filling the space with questions, assumptions, and fear. They overtext, overcall, overexplain. They start replaying every conversation in their head, looking for signs that something is wrong. And without realizing it, they turn a small pause into a big problem. A man feels that pressure immediately. It feels like expectation. It feels like emotional weight. And most men retreat from that, not because they don't care, but because they don't want to feel responsible for someone else's emotional stability. A man is paying close attention to whether you can regulate your emotions without making him the center of them. Can you sit with discomfort without creating drama? Can you stay calm without needing constant reassurance? When you don't hear from him for a while, do you assume the worst or do you assume yourself? That difference matters more than you think. Here's something powerful. A woman who can remain composed during emotional uncertainty sends a message without saying a word. That message is, I trust myself. And that kind of confidence is magnetic. It tells a man that you are emotionally mature, that you won't crumble under pressure, that you won't turn a very challenge into a crisis. Men admire strength, but emotional strength is what makes them feel safe. Now, let me be clear. Handling emotional pressure does not mean suppressing your feelings. It doesn't mean pretending you don't care. It means responding instead of reacting. There's a big difference. Reacting is emotional chaos. Responding is emotional control. When something bothers you, can you express it calmly instead of explosively? Can you communicate without accusing? A man listens when he doesn't feel attacked. Men test this subtly. He might delay a response. He might change plans. He might be less expressive for a moment, and he's watching. Does she immediately jump to conclusions? Does she make it about her worth? Does she start trying to force clarity, or does she give space while staying grounded in who she is? That answer tells him how life with you might feel long term, because life is pressure, bills, careers, family, setbacks. A man wants to know if you will be his peace or another source of stress. If every challenge turns into an emotional storm, he will hesitate. But if you can face tension with grace, patience, and self-assurance, he leans in. He feels supported rather than overwhelmed. Another thing men notice is how you handle disagreement. Do you need to win or do you want understanding? Under pressure, do you listen or do you escalate? Emotional maturity shows in your ability to stay respectful even when you're upset, when you don't throw past mistakes in his face, when you don't use silence as punishment, when you don't weaponize emotions to gain control. A man sees that and thinks, this is someone I can build with. Let me tell you something real. Men are afraid of emotional volatility. They won't always say it, but they feel it. Unpredictable reactions make men shut down. Calm responses invite conversation. When a woman can say, this bothered me, without raising her voice or threatening the relationship, she earns respect because she's showing strength, not weakness. Handling emotional pressure also means not chasing reassurance. If you constantly need validation to feel secure, a man feels drained. But when you are emotionally whole on your own, reassurance becomes a bonus, not a necessity. That changes everything. A man doesn't feel trapped. He feels chosen. And here's the part most people miss. When you stay calm under pressure, you also protect your own dignity. You don't send messages you regret. You don't say things you can't take back. You don't compromise your values just to ease anxiety. You stay aligned with yourself. And that alignment shows. A man may not articulate it, but he feels the difference between a woman who is emotionally reactive and one who is emotionally secure. One creates tension. The other creates peace. One makes him cautious. The other makes him curious, open, and willing. So when things feel uncertain, when silence shows up, when pressure is in the air, understand this. That moment is speaking louder than any conversation. How you handle it is answering a question he hasn't asked out loud. And the answer you give through your behavior is the one he remembers. Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you about something that speaks louder than beauty, louder than attraction, louder than words ever could. Self-respect. Because whether people admit it or not, this is one of the biggest things a man is watching for. Not what you say you deserve, but what you actually allow. Not what you post, not what you claim, but what you tolerate when nobody is applauding you. A man is always paying attention to how you treat yourself because that becomes the blueprint for how he treats you. He doesn't wake up one day and randomly decide your value. He learns it. And most of what he learns comes from watching what you accept, what you excuse, and what you walk away from. Here's where it gets tricky. Men don't usually test self-respect by doing something extreme at first. It starts small, a late call, a forgotten plan, a boundary crossed just this once, and he's watching closely, not to see how angry you get, but to see how serious you are about yourself. Do you speak up calmly and clearly, or do you stay silent and hope he changes on his own? Do you stand firm, or do you explain his behavior for him? A woman with self-respect doesn't need to threaten. She doesn't need to raise her voice. She doesn't need to give ultimatums. Her energy already communicates, I know who I am, and I know what I will not accept. That kind of clarity is powerful, and it's rare. A lot of people think self-respect means being cold, distant, or hard. No, self-respect is being kind without being a doormat, loving without losing yourself, giving without overgiving. It's being warm but not desperate, open but not unprotected. A man feels that balance immediately. Men notice when you don't chase what disrespects you, when you don't argue to be valued, when you don't beg for basic consideration. Because here's the truth. Anything a man has to be forced into, he never truly owns. But when he sees that you are willing to walk away from what doesn't honor you, something shifts in his mind. He realizes this woman is not afraid to lose me. And that's when respect shows up. Let me say this slowly. Fear makes you flexible in all the wrong places. When you're afraid of being alone, you'll tolerate things you shouldn't. You'll explain away behavior that hurts you. You'll shrink your standards just to keep someone close. And a man can sense that fear even if you never say it out loud. When he senses it, he may not do it intentionally, but he starts pushing boundaries to see how far they go. Self-respect stops that, not by confrontation, but by consistency. When you say no and mean it, when you set a boundary and enforce it, not sometimes, every time. Men are not confused by boundaries. They are confused by inconsistency. If you complain but stay, argue but accept, threaten but never leave, you teach him that your words don't carry weight. A woman with self-respect understands that her standards are not punishments, they are protections. She doesn't lower them to be chosen. She raises her life to meet them. And that energy is undeniable. A man may test it, but deep down he admires it because discipline, clarity, and self-worth are qualities men respect in themselves and in a partner. Another thing men watch closely is how you respond when you feel disrespected. Do you explode, insult, and burn bridges? Or do you remain calm and decisive? Emotional outbursts may feel powerful in the moment, but they weaken your position. Calm firmness strengthens it. When you can say, "This doesn't work for me," without drama, without insults, without begging, you gain power. Self-respect also shows in what you don't explain. You don't owe long justifications for your boundaries. You don't need to convince someone why basic respect matters. A man who values you doesn't need a lecture. And a man who doesn't value you won't be convinced by one. Men also test whether you respect your own time. Are you always available at his convenience? Do you drop everything when he calls, or do you have a full life that doesn't pause for anyone? A woman who values her time sends a clear message: my life matters. And when your life matters to you, it starts to matter to him. Here's a hard truth. A man will rarely rise above the standard you set at the beginning. That's why self-respect early on is critical. Not aggression, not attitude, just clarity. When you show him from day one that you won't accept half-effort, mixed signals, or disrespect disguised as jokes, you filter out the wrong energy naturally. And understand this: self-respect doesn't guarantee someone will stay, but it guarantees you won't lose yourself trying to keep them. And that's the real win, because the right man doesn't feel threatened by your standards. He feels challenged by them, inspired by them, drawn to them. A man may not say it out loud, but when he sees a woman who knows her worth and lives by it, something in him steps up or steps away. Either way, she remains intact, she remains whole, she remains powerful. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what self-respect really does. Ladies and gentlemen, now let's talk about something most people completely underestimate, and that is patience. Because patience is not just about waiting. Patience is about how you handle time, uncertainty, and the natural pace of life and relationships. It's about understanding that love, respect, and trust cannot be rushed. A man is always watching how you manage the tempo of a relationship, even if he never says it out loud. And let me tell you, this is where most women fail. Not because they aren't strong, not because they don't take care, but because they misunderstand timing. Patience shows a man that you are secure in yourself. When a man is not ready to commit, or when he needs space, or when things aren't moving as fast as you want, do you panic? Do you start sending messages that reveal your fear? Do you overcompensate, overexplain, overgive? Or do you trust the process, trust yourself, and understand that life unfolds in its own timing? The way you react to the waiting period, whether it's a few days, weeks, or months, tells him everything about your emotional maturity and your level of self-confidence. See, men are not always bad at expressing feelings. Sometimes they are cautious. Sometimes they are careful because they don't want to make the wrong move. And sometimes they need to see that you can handle uncertainty without losing your sense of self. If you can demonstrate that, it shows him that you are capable of long-term thinking and stability, two qualities that every man wants in a partner, whether he articulates them or not. Patience also tests whether you understand the difference between neediness and desire. Needing someone is born out of fear, fear of being alone, fear of missing out, fear of not being chosen. Desire comes from security, knowing that you want someone that your happiness is not dependent on them. When a man senses that you are needy, he feels pressure. When he senses that you are patient and secure, he feels invited. An invitation is far more attractive than desperation. Now, let me tell you something critical. Patience is also a measure of self-discipline. It shows a man that you are in control of your emotions and your actions. You don't jump at every opportunity for reassurance. You don't force commitment or labels before the foundation of trust is built. You don't create crises to speed things up. You simply allow life to unfold while remaining consistent, grounded, and present. And that presence, that calm confidence, speaks louder than words ever could. Think about it like this: life is a series of moments, and a relationship is no different. The way you respond to each moment is what defines it. If you rush, overreact, or try to manipulate timing, you introduce chaos and doubt. If you slow down, observe, and act with intention, you create clarity and security. And men notice that. They may not always articulate it, but they feel it. They are drawn to women who can navigate uncertainty without panic. Patience is also closely linked to trust. Trust in yourself and trust in the other person. When you rush someone, you communicate a lack of trust, either in their feelings, in their intentions, or in the natural timing of events. When you are patient, you communicate confidence. Confidence in your own value, confidence in the relationship, and confidence in life itself. That kind of energy is magnetic. It pulls people in without a word. It commands respect without a demand. Another subtle way men test patience is through their actions, or in some cases, inaction. He might take time to respond. He might hesitate in making decisions. He might delay commitment to gauge your reaction. And what he's really watching is not whether you pressure him, but whether you remain composed and aligned with yourself while waiting. Do you continue living your life fully, pursuing your goals and maintaining your dignity? Or do you let uncertainty drive your behavior and compromise your values? A woman who can exercise patience without sacrificing her self-respect teaches a man something vital: that relationships are not about filling voids or rushing outcomes. They are about mutual growth, mutual understanding, and mutual respect. And when he realizes that you are secure enough to wait for what is right, he respects you more, values you more, and begins to step into his role more fully. Patience also reveals a woman's long-term vision. When you are willing to let things unfold naturally, it shows that you are thinking about the bigger picture, not just immediate gratification. Men notice vision, the ability to see beyond the moment. And when they sense that you have a plan, that you are aligned with your life goals, and that you won't compromise for temporary satisfaction, they feel compelled to rise to meet that level of intention. Here's the truth that too many people miss: patience is not passive. Patience is active engagement without panic. It's living fully, communicating clearly, setting boundaries, and maintaining standards while allowing the process to unfold. It's not waiting with fear or desperation. It's waiting with confidence and self-assuredness. And that is the kind of patience that earns respect, loyalty, and true connection. Ultimately, patience is a reflection of your value. It says, without saying a word, I am whole. I am secure. I know my worth. I will not settle. I will not chase recklessly. I will allow life and love to flow naturally, and I will remain true to myself while I wait. And when a man sees that, it changes everything. He steps up or he steps away, but either way, you remain intact. You remain powerful. You remain unshakable. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember this: patience is more than just waiting. Patience is the ultimate test of your confidence, your self-respect, your emotional maturity, and your alignment with yourself. It's the quiet, subtle way you teach a man that you are not to be rushed, not to be taken for granted, and not to be manipulated. And when you master patience, you master influence, not by force, but by presence, by consistency, and by unwavering self-assurance. That is how the right man is drawn in and the wrong energy is naturally filtered out. And that, my friends, is how true power in relationships is cultivated